Hey, I'm Brooke from Rise Apathy is Boring Cohort 7. Today's episode, we will be focusing on leadership with our guest, Gololcha. Gololcha is a refugee from Ethiopia settling in the Central Park neighborhood of Winnipeg, Manitoba. He grew up to the harsh realities of poverty, gangs, and racism. It was this upbringing that shaped his views and motivated him to change the narrative of people from marginalized communities. Upon graduation from the University of Winnipeg, he began working at the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization in Manitoba. During his time here, he disrupted, for the better, many sectors such as education, justice, sport, and health for newcomer youth in Winnipeg. He is also a 2020 United Nations People of African Descent Fellow and is currently working at the City of Winnipeg in the recently formed Community Development Division. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are super excited to have you. I guess we can just kind of get right into things here. I'm wondering if, to start off, you just wanted to kind of share more about your background, your expertise, the kind of delve into more of the work that you've been doing in our communities.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me here today. Like you said, I came to Winnipeg as a young boy and experienced some things that I don't think many children or young people should. And that kind of shaped the person that I am today, but also gives me a lot of the strive to make a change and disrupt a lot of the systems that have established and embedded in our society a great inequality when it comes to accessibility of different resources and different, rising up the social stratosphere of, the heights of society. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Also, it's my understanding that you also do have a background in sports. I know that you were a coach for a soccer team. I'm wondering if you kind of want to share a little bit about your experiences in that sector.
For sure, yes. In regards to sport, grew up playing it. I have an insatiable hunger for watching it. I'm a big fan. And for a lot of the work that I did initially when it came into newcomer youth work, a lot of that revolved around sports. So I started as a volunteer with the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization in Manitoba, IRCOM, and I was a volunteer soccer coach, but actually I started as a team doctor and made my way up to an assistant coach and there into a head coach, and now I'm kind of oversee somewhat some of the programming that they do in terms of the soccer programming. But I think sport represents such an important part for a lot of young people when it comes into their integration into a new society. For a lot of them, it's the only time that they have the chance to be a youth, a child. There's no expectation. There's nothing that will differentiate them. Everyone is equal on the playing field. But one of the harsh realities that I've seen as a coach and mentoring young people in the city of Winnipeg is a lot of the time we're not on an equal playing field when we get out there. I've experienced firsthand name callings from parents, from other coaches, from the players that were playing. Some of the girls that I've coached have been subjugated to Islamophobia, xenophobia, outward sexism, and their bodies being sexualized by referees. So within that frame, it's been disheartening, but I think we're doing a lot of change. IRCOM is pushing the envelope in terms of requiring a lot of the provincial sport organizations to change. And as well as, I'm an advisor for the anti-racism in sport campaign launched in Winnipeg as well. And with that, we're looking to really educate all sectors, stakeholders within the sport. So from athletes to parents to leaders within sports institutions, but also board members that lie within the community centers, because here in Winnipeg, a lot of the community centers are the first entryway for a lot of the sport that a lot of people play here.
Absolutely. Well, it really does sound like you are doing a lot of incredible work within the community to make changes. I'm wondering if you can maybe share with us a specific example of some racism within sports that either yourself or your team players have experienced.
For sure. I think, the one of the big things is, I sit here and I'm talking to you today, and unfortunately, I have a number of situations I can to pick from. And, I'm here today to really fight and change. The biggest thing is, I think a lot of people don't realize the racism, the inequality and the unwelcomingness of sport has also played a part in pushing a lot of young people away. And what that means is a lot of young people not only are not going to be active for life or continue to play sport, for a lot of people, that is the only place where they have or feel a sense of belonging. So when they experience, the harshness of racism, it can be very unbecoming of some people, and it really puts them the wrong way. I think one of the times I'll mention here is the most recent example is I was at that time as a parent advisory person. They have them in games. An intercom team was playing. The coaches were there. I was there to make sure that nothing was going to happen. Game ended, and one of the players on the other team told one of our players to go back on that boat. And the thing that was shocking to me was the referee heard it, made clear he heard it, gave the player a red card. But the thing that was disappointing and was an eye-opening experience, the league was then given a written document explicitly saying what the referee had heard. And the league had deemed that not to be a disciplinary action required on top of the red card. So, and to give you some context, we've had some players on our team and other players from racialized backgrounds that have had just the act of throwing a ball, tossing a ball to a referee taking it and feeling that their life has been threatened. And we've had players that have been initially banned for life from playing any kind of organized sport in Winnipeg. And this person is directly saying a comment. There was a hearing, there's all this process, and then the coach of that player refused to admit that one of his players did say it. And then when he was forced to admit that it was said, he refused to reveal the identity of the player that was said. So it's not only that the league failed, it was also the other coach of the other team failed his players into acknowledging what was said was wrong. And I might not know what the effect that comment may have on my player, but maybe down the line, that comment can really push him or her away from a lot of the positive things that sport can bring. And the reality is there's an intersectionality that comes with the reality of the people that are not playing sport in the city of Winnipeg. First Nation, Métis, Inuit, Black, racialized, and religious minority people are also the individuals that are living in inadequate housing, that are suffering from poverty. 1 in 4 children in Winnipeg lives in poverty. So what surrounds poverty? A lot of the underground economy, drugs, gangs, sex work. That comment might push this person there. And there's no accountability, being forced upon anyone in this situation. And I think to me, it was a really disappointing act that happened, but also the lack of leadership from the provincial sport organization, from the league, and from the parents and the coaches of the other team you know, that comment can really affect someone's mentality and mental health going forward, because then they question what is their space in society? What are they doing in this new land? They weren't forced to come here, you know? They were forced to leave their house and leave their family and leave their country. But the reality is they're brought here because of external reasons, you know? And I think that's the thing that's lacking. And you know, there's many examples in the First Nations community and their experiences with hockey, but it's something that's prevalent, and I think it's something that that a lot of white people in Canada, and especially in Winnipeg, fail to recognize that exists, because it is so prevalent in all sports.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Um, yeah, I'm honestly like at a loss for words for some of those experiences that you've gone through or your players have gone through. I'm curious to kind of touch more on, you mentioned, referees feeling very threatened when a player picks up the ball as if it's a direct threat to them, which obviously it's not. But I'm a little bit curious about like tone policing and that kind of stuff with players.
For sure. And I think referees, and it's also goes down to a lot of the leadership that's in sport as well. In Manitoba, they recently passed a new law that players are not allowed to say anything on the field. It doesn't matter what language you speak. And a lot of those decisions come from, a lot of the other languages that are used by newcomers when they play, somewhat can be aggressive in tone, but really it's a pleasant discussion. I'll give you an example. When I worked at IRCOM, IRCOM is a transitional housing unit for newcomers to Canada, and there was a family from Iraq that was in their household, and they were talking and conversing very aggressively and loudly, and the neighbors felt that something bad was going on. They called the police. The police came to the house and they said, something's wrong. What's going on? We hear loud voices, loud shouting. And it was just a husband and wife who were just talking to each other in their own language. And, people are expressive, emotive of their emotions while they speak from different cultures. And it's that kind of lack of cultural competency that's there that, I can have a very fierce conversation that might sound fierce to some people, but we could be just talking in our own language. And that's the thing that's lost in, it's funny in translation, but it's so prevalent. And I think it's the same thing with decisions that, when a referee sees, a black boy just tossing him a ball, he might think he's going to throw it to him and hurt him. I don't know why, but there is that kind of, embedded cultural, perceiving that one is aggressive while the other one is not. And I think these kinds of stereotypes have to be kind of dismantled.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm curious to know, how have you adjusted your leadership to ensure that your players feel safe, at practice, in the locker rooms, or on the fields?
Right. Yeah, I think the big thing for us is, it's throughout all of our teams at IRCOM, we really go in depth of, really explaining to our players the importance of not reacting and not succumbing to some of the taunting and some of the words that they may hear and some of the actions their opponents may put to them in terms of racial or sexist or Islamophobic. And it's really this nonviolent approach. We've learned the hard way. We've had experiences where players have reacted, and it's turned out negative. But we really teach the importance of telling the coaches what's going on, identifying leaders on the field, and really explaining to them that in a lot of situations, the other opponent or the fans of the opponent want us to react. Because if we react, it's a victory for them. Because then we are basically proving to them that their actions are right, their perceptions of us are right. That if we react to them, that the whole time, oh, this person is, is a violent person, this person is hurting me, this person is doing this and that, so for a lot of us, we do a lot, for a soccer practice, you'll see us maybe do 2 or 3 sessions throughout the year where a ball is not kicked and we're sitting in the grass and we're just talking, explaining. We give the space to our players to let out their emotions and let them express to us what they're feeling, what's making them unsafe. And then from there, it's our job as coaches, as mentors, and as leaders of the teams to really go and convey these messages to the league administrators and to make sure that they're being heard. And I think the one thing I will say is the importance of documenting experiences is critical, because hearsay is one thing, but if you're able to document the exact time, the exact moment in a game, the day it was, and document it and send those documents as soon as possible to league administrators, it holds them accountable, because not only is there a proof of transfer of documents through emails, correspondence, but then it puts them into the situation of what are you going to do now with these substantiated allegations of proof of what's going on. And I think to us, that's been the biggest thing and the biggest learning curve, because when you sign up to be a coach, you really don't sign up to do all these things. But it's the unfortunate reality of what it is when you are coaching predominantly, newcomers to Winnipeg.
Yeah, I think that one thing that's just so disheartening is the fact that you're taking on all this extra responsibility that I just don't think should be yours in the first place. I think that, we should have referees that have a no tolerance for spectators who are, saying hurtful, blatantly racist comments, just heckling in the audience. I think that, that same quickness to card players of color on the field should be reciprocated in a quickness to eject those spectators from the game. And I'm assuming from what you've said here, that's not occurring. People are not getting kicked out when they say these things.
I will say I've been a coach in the Winnipeg Youth Soccer Association for the last, we're in 2021, so for the last 7 to 8 years. And in my experiences, I've experienced one time, and I went up and I told the referee exactly how happy I was and proud of him I was, because he made all the other fans, so the parents of the players that we were playing against, and there was their home field, and he told them they all had to leave. And if they didn't, the game would be canceled. And it was that moment of courage by that referee to acknowledge the comments that were coming from the parents. Not only were, derogatory, xenophobic, racist in nature, but there was no space for it at all. And he had the courage. It's one person versus 45. There is that innate fear of, what happens if they turn on me. But he made the step, and he said, this is not right. And that, there is the other experience where I spoke about earlier, where the referee clearly heard what he had heard and made it clear what was said. And I think there is somewhat of a shift occurring amongst a lot of the stakeholders within sport. But I think the biggest thing that is lacking is, we sit here on May, we're filming this on May 29th, 4 days after George Floyd, the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd. And, I'm a Black man in Winnipeg. I never have watched the George Floyd film, and I never will. But I took down, and I know what organizations within this city made statements claiming to make changes regarding anti-racism initiatives. And a lot of them came from sport organizations. And we're 1 year on, and a lot of those statements are empty. And I think is now the next phase is for individuals like myself and other community leaders and organizers to go in and hold these organizations accountable, because making a statement on the seriousness of, one man has lost his life, he was murdered, and you are going to use that as an opportunity to claim that you are an ally. Allyship is something that's very comprehensive, but if you're not really going to do the work, then you cannot be called an ally. And I think it's important that in that step, in that aspect, that the organizations and the leaders within those organizations really make a shift. Because I will say there has been a shift within some of the stakeholders within sport.
Sure. Would you be able to, further go into depth on that, on where you have seen change and where organizations have spoke about creating change and the lack of it since then?
Yeah, I think it's abundant. So a lot of the universities, the two big universities, made statements. They're committed, and they have certain programs and initiatives that they've started up that are really looking to make some change there. I think the city of Winnipeg is in the very early stages of making change, and positive change in that step. And I think, the one thing I saw, and it's maybe a little bit bigger, I think Basketball Canada is from what I see and from what I hear, not only in terms of anti-racism initiatives, but more in terms of even the gender balance, to make it a more gender exclusive. And I think inclusionary, I should say, is something all Canadians should be proud. And I think basketball has been one of the sports that really understands. You see, in terms of the makeup of their boards, the makeup of their coaching, and even reflective of what the players look like when they go out and represent at all the provincial levels. There's great diversity in there. And I think those are examples that have been done really well. Examples that I think that have been very poor is, I'm not going to hide behind it, Manitoba Soccer Association, the Winnipeg Youth Soccer Association, empty words. And I'm really interested to see what is going to be done. We're in COVID. It's been almost 2 years now that there's been no soccer for most of the kids that really can't afford it, groups like us. And I think those are the organizations that are on the top of my mind. I'm sure there's many. And I'm sure if you ask other individuals within the city, they'll have much more names. But yeah, those are ones I have on the top of my mind.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm completely in agreement with you when you say, it's not just enough to say that change needs to be made. I truly think that you are not fully being anti-racist if you aren't doing the work. You need to, put in actions in order to actually truly be anti-racist. And I'm just wondering if you have any advice on how to be a better ally in a situation like this. I'm not involved in sports at the moment. In the past, I played sports all throughout high school. But as someone who's not in that anymore, how can I be an ally? How can I ensure that change is being made in these organizations?
Right. I think the big thing is, first, for a lot of people, listen to the voices of the marginalized. Listen to them and hear what they're saying, and also at the same time empower those voices. So if you have an opportunity to go and maybe talk to leaders or talk to decision makers, bring those voices with you, and elevate them and put them on platforms where they can go and make more noise to affect more positive change. But also, I think as allies, the work is continuous. There is, listen to the voices of the marginalized. Ask them what can be best use of my time as an ally. And I think working with them is better than saying that you're working on behalf, but you're not really contacting or listening to them. And I think that's the biggest uh, gap that I see, where people, claim to have said they listen and whatever, and they say they're working on our behalf. We've never met them. We don't know who they are. They don't even know what the experiences are. There's a lot of assumption there. But I think if you can work with them and hear them and amplify their voices, that's the biggest thing about allyship. I think that's there.
Yeah, I think that that's really, really great advice. Can you touch on the lack of funding for your team and backlash that your team received from other teams or parents who were of wealthier backgrounds?
For sure. I think the big thing in terms of funding, and it's the model within Winnipeg, and I think in general, the model in Canada is it's a pay to place model. And I think that really disadvantages on the onset marginalized communities. But, there's a lot of Canadian kids, white Canadian kids, that sport has just gone past them as well. Sport is not, it's not a thing that everyone can access. It's expensive to play um, a game that you think would be so easy, soccer, because this is something that I have the most background experiences. It is now almost $350 to play indoor, $250 to $300 to play outdoor soccer. So if you want to have a child that plays soccer year round, you're looking about $600 to $750. That's a lot of money for a single parent or a double income household, especially if you have more than one child. I think those are the systems that really have to be changed. I will go out and say I think it's the work that Kids Sport Manitoba does in terms of, and Canadian Tire Jumpstart in terms of trying to fill in those gaps is remarkable and commendable. But I think decisions have to be started to change in terms of the federal level. What is their intention with sport? Because I think as we go through, things are just going to get more and more expensive, and this model of pay to play doesn't work. And we have to understand what are the real objectives that we're trying to do. We want people to play sport for a lot of reasons: to be active, to be healthy, to build a social capital for them. A lot of people, they meet their friends, they meet other parents who are do different things, and it builds a sense of community amongst a team and a community center and whatever it may be. But if it becomes too exclusionary, I think a lot of the benefits of sport really just go out the window. And I think that's why we have examples of situations where there's rampant obesity in the country amongst young people. People are not very active, and there's a general, especially amongst young women and young girls, a lack of interest into sport. And why is that? Because it's very important to get everyone in it.
For sure. I think also too, when thinking about the expense of sports, those costs there, those are just the upright costs to play. That doesn't even include equipment or cleats. And if it's a young child who's growing constantly, those clothes don't last that long, or those shoes don't last that long. And that's another additional cost on top of it, or even just commuting to the games, to tournaments. And I think that really leaves out a lot of people. which kind of in turn directly translates into a lower representation of marginalized folks in professional or higher level sports. Maybe you
I
could.
couldn't agree more with that, Brooke. Like those external costs, those hidden costs they call it, it's so evident. And in marginalized communities, when you have parents who don't have vehicles, and games are sometimes 45, 65 minutes outside of your local area, the expectation of a bus to go take kids far away, you know equipment is a big thing. There's the reality of kids go through maybe two or three sizes of shoes in a season. Shoes are expensive. All of these things are hidden, and they're not really taken into account when people think about playing sports. So that's a great point.
Yeah, definitely. Can you maybe share what motivated you to become a coach and be in a leadership role to a lot of younger players?
Right. I think the big thing for me was, in Winnipeg we have a quite large newcomer population, and I know firsthand. I have experienced the power of sport. I grew up playing sport, and even in my household, I was very lucky because I have five sisters. I was the only one that was allowed to play sports. Culturally, at that time, my parents didn't believe that my younger sister should have played sports. But I witnessed and I saw what sports gave to me. It gave me the ability to critically think. They gave me the ability to make friends, to build a social network and capital, meeting other people, seeing things. I think the biggest thing was, seeing things. And I think I know what that can mean for a lot of the young people that I was working with or volunteering with at Aircom. And I'll tell you a story. Was just a simple thing about sport. Our downtown, there's one bridge, the Osborne Bridge, that goes into the south side of the city. And we made a team, and we took the team to go play a game in the south side of the city, 45 minutes away. And for a lot of these kids, they had never left the downtown in their whole life. They'd been in Canada for 3 to 4 years. In Winnipeg, I should say, for 3 to 4. They had never left that part of the city. And that is, when you say what makes you want to do sport, sport is such a special thing because it gives people the ability to see different things that they haven't seen before, experience new things, but also it gives them, at the core of it was, a lot of these kids are put in situations where they go to school where they don't know the language, they're made fun of. They have to go and, translate things at doctors' offices, lawyers' offices for their mom and dad who don't know the language really well. There's an extra burden on them. And I think they're trying to fit in. Being a kid who's like between the ages of 12 to 17, everyone's confused at that time in their life. And for a lot of them, they don't really get a chance to just let everything go and just be who they are, express what they want to do. And I think that's the thing that drew me to sport. Sport really let a lot of these newcomer youth go and let me see who you really are. Express yourself. And also do that in a safe environment where, we're going to be here as a team. You're going to build relationships with other people who are experiencing the same thing as you, and let's grow together. And I think it's such a unique thing, and it has such a great power that puts people and moves them onto a social mobility ladder that can maybe change their life. And if I could help young people do that, then I think, let me go out and try to do it as best as I can. So that's why I went into it.
I really love that. You're clearly very passionate about it, and I truly think everyone that plays sports deserves to have a coach as dedicated as you are. what is the first step in getting more people of color into more leadership roles?
Yeah, I think the big thing for that one is, number one, we have to make sure that the platforms that in terms of leadership roles, those platforms are really want to make a change, because it's important. We don't want to have people there just to be there and be tokens. We need them to be put in an environment where they can prosper and really change the way things are done. And I think that goes into the unfortunate reality is we have a group of people that are really determined decisions in sport. Is this group of people ready to change on its own and bring people up to help affect that change? If they're not, what's going to happen is these people of color are going to build up, and you're going to have situations where they might go and start their own groups. We have a lot of ethnocultural leagues of some sort, and of course we don't want that, because we want to have the mix of people playing. But I think the work is not on us to really understand their privilege and to understand that what we're doing here is wrong. We need other voices, and we will bring these voices and listen to them and give them a space to really make change. If it's not going to be like that, then that's the failure of it. But I think that's the only way, really.
I agree. This is kind of a bit of a loaded question, but what do you think the biggest obstacles to changing leadership in sports organizations are?
I think it's the mentality of some people that when it comes to sport, there is a failure to recognize the impact it can have on someone, and there's the failure to recognize that sport is just not one thing. It's not go play a ball. There's multi layers of it, and things have evolved from when person is started and joined the board of an organization, where the landscape is completely changed. And I think that people say that there's this argument that sport organizations need newcomers and First Nations, Inuit and Métis people to come and play because this is the new subset of population that's growing. That's a great take, but I think people kind of run on that take, and then they go in and they fail to make sure that the environment that these groups are coming to play are really open and welcoming. And then you have people that go in and then they're, subjugated to, racism and whatnot. I think it's critical that conversations have to be had within these decision makers. And I think that people have to understand that things are changing in society. And like anything, sport is like that. Sport has to evolve as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that is just about time for us here. So I think that we'll end it on that note. But I just really wanted to say thank you so much for coming here and discussing with us. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing some personal experiences. You're clearly very knowledgeable in this topic, and you're doing amazing work. So thank you so very much. This has been really great chatting with you and getting to know more about various sports organizations in our city, and clearly changes need to be done. So let's keep working towards that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me today.